Hey, my friend, how has your week been? Did you go through a time change? I don't know if that was everywhere. For me, we had one, and let me tell you something. It completely just shook me. Everything just seemed so much harder this week. It was harder to write my book. It was harder to work on the podcast. It was harder to even get out of bed. But I'm making it, and I think I'm adjusting, and I hope if you went through a time change this week that you're adjusting too. Thank you so much for pressing play and tuning into the URC space today. My name is Nash, and it's really been my privilege to be the host of this podcast where we are just having conversations about intentionally unboxing our lives one blank space at a time. And I've really enjoyed the conversations that we've had so far. We're here on the 8th episode of the first season, which is really exciting because we've made it past the pod fade. I don't know if you guys know that there's this thing where new podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes for whatever reason. And so when you make it past the 7th episode, you've conquered the pod fade mountain. So thanks for helping me conquer that mountain. And I've got a lot more amazing things in store to share with you here. But I've noticed that many of you have been writing into the show and sliding into my DMs on Instagram. And you've been saying you would like to know if there's going to be more guests. Is there going to be a visual component to the show? Do I have an audience in my studio? And I will be revealing and answering some of those things on the horizon. But I hope today's episode, for those of you who enjoy having the guest format, will enjoy what I'm going to be talking about with my friend Tim. Tim is the host of the Student of Life podcast. And if you haven't tuned into his show, let me tell you, after you listen to today's episode, when we unbox this conversation, you're going to be subscribe to his because he is just a wealth of wisdom, a wealth of knowledge, and someone who I really just admire in this podcasting space, and particularly as another Black Christian millennial guy just out here in these streets striving and thriving. And I'm just so happy our schedules were able to align to do this episode. Let's just get right into it. Tim has got some amazing things to share with us. So without further ado, let's dive right into the conversation. So today, everyone, we are in the Mancave Space, and we're going to be talking about this uncrackable BroCode or code of men that we kind of share between each other. And why does it sometimes feel so hard to be relatable, and why does it feel so hard for other people to understand? And I'm hoping that when we walk away from our conversation today, that we will be able to see how we can cultivate a greater sense of brotherhood as men, and how it will only be an added bonus to our lives as we continue to navigate moving forward. My guest co-host today, he is an associate pastor. He is also a senior technical project manager. And like I said, he is the host of the Student of Life podcast. You can find it wherever podcasts are streamed. Please help me welcome to the URC space for the first and hopefully not for the last time, Mr. Timothy Pratt Jr. Tim, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm great, man. Hey, listen, I'm very humble, and I really appreciate the introduction, man. Like I say, it's likewise. But I'm doing very well tonight, man. I'm truly honored and privileged to be on tonight with you, man.
Man, I'm so glad to have you here on the show. And I'm so glad that, as brothers, we can kind of just enter into, kind of like a virtual barbershop, if we will, and kind of unbox this a little bit. So, when looking at kind of what the BroCode is, right? I mean, BroCode is such a broad term, and you can break it down into so many things. BroCode on this, BroCode on that, BroCode on this. Okay, well, there's like a few like baseline things, right? I mean, like I can say, first and foremost, we know that, when you go into a public bathroom, you should not pee in the stall next to another guy if he is peeing right there in that stall, right? I can't tell you how many times I travel extensively, and, when you get off a plane, what's the first thing you got to do? You got to go pee. And literally, folks just breaking the BroCode, ain't got no remorse, ain't got no sympathy, no anything. So I'm going to say most of us know that that's a part of the code, right? Like we shouldn't do that. But, exactly. And, if a bunch of us get together and we start talking about sports, we can just go on and on and on and on, even sometimes about cars. There's so many different little things that we as guys kind of treasure and cherish as being, our own kind of conversations. Not saying that women don't have them either, but when guys do them, it just feels different. But when it comes to sharing about the non-surface stuff, right? I mean, we can laugh about people peeing next to you, and we can, joke about, this one and what play this guy made on the field, or what kind of car, the neighbor up the street bought. But when it comes to the different challenges and hard things that we experience as men, Why do you think, or why do you see that there is maybe some stigma associated with being a little bit more vulnerable in that area?
Man, so for starters, personally, for me, kind of growing up, of course, I'm a black man, of course.
Hey,
So growing
you're in
up,
good company.
around a lot of black people, black friends and things like that. I think one of the biggest things is we weren't taught to really express ourselves on beyond surface level things. Like you said, we could
Mm,
talk about all of these things. We could, and it's traditionally that black people, from my perspective, uh, especially in more recent now, we're seeing a lot of black people launch a lot of different things, businesses and things like that. But
mm,
if we really back it up, we come from a history of having to just survive.
wow.
And so
Wow.
when we in survival instincts, we didn't really have time to figure out or dig deep. Mental health and therapy is led by Charlemagne, on the Breakfast Club. And
Hmm.
he's really
Hmm.
been pioneered, I think, to help us unpack those things. So,
Yeah.
so all that being said, I think one of the first stigma is just our lack of understanding ourselves, never taking that
Wow.
time to really do deep dives and say, okay, why is this associated with me? Why didn't I never unpack this? Why don't I question myself? Did you hear things like when you were trying to express in yourself, boy, shut up, just listen, just do what I say, and
Hmm.
stuff like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And so I think then so we're in survival, what's the next big thing? We laugh things off. We learn, like I say, just how to play, how to joke, and so on and so on. So it's just because we want to. It's a protective mode, to be honest. If a lot of men will be honest, especially black men, it's easier to do those things because it keeps you at bay. It's just easier to just stay there. My initial response to the question.
Yeah, and I think that that's so true, and that's so real, especially looking at the history of the lineage we come from as black men.
Yep.
We just got to just kind of take the lick and keep on ticking, and just
Yep.
keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, and just keep moving. And yeah, it's interesting that you say that. Yeah, Charlemagne. I've been, peeping in every now and again on the Breakfast Club. Charlemagne has been a vocal voice with,
Yep.
really, openly talking about, him going through counseling and having a
Right.
therapist and all of those kinds of things, which, as black men, I don't recall Steve Harvey or Samuel L. Jackson or even Barack Obama, openly talking about therapy in that kind of
Agreed.
regard. You know what I mean? So, it's great, folks like Charlemagne and, in echoing in the conversation that we're having today too, as black men, are encouraging that. So let's just kind of double click on that for a minute. As black men, what do you think we can do, or what is something that maybe even you maybe have found, to be a best practice, or something to be considered that maybe black men maybe have not considered before, to really get ourselves to a place where we don't feel like we need to be so barricaded and walls up when it
Yep.
comes to so many things of our life where we were meant to kind of thrive with each other, and we need each other to survive.
Yep. No, I agree. Man, so for starters, for me, especially being in the context of ministry,
Yeah.
I get to deal with a lot of different people from various backgrounds. And I'm not sure if you know this, but in my seminary school, I actually studied, biblical counseling or through theological studies. And one of the things that I learned when I was, talking to young black men in general, I believe that we have to get in tune with vulnerability. Brene Brown, she's one of the best people out there when you talk about somebody that can really break down this concept that vulnerability is not weak, it's not a coward, it's not the stigma that's usually associated with it. And then it's courage. So I think those two things for me have are basically the first two things that I would point to. And then, the next question might be, well, with who? And I don't want to jump ahead, but it's just to me when I'm vulnerable and I'm talking to, someone like you or my father or just a good friend, we have to have that accountability. Like you can call me up, just using it as an example. If I know that I can trust you, we have built a relationship. You share things. It's a give and take. You can't expect for me to just keep sharing things with you and you never open up to me. And so I think as black men, that's one area that we have to really just be okay with, like, okay, listen, I'm going to have to be vulnerable and lose that stigma that's what's associated with it, and just learn how to navigate those things. And so, one of the first steps I say, man, like podcasts like this, podcasts like yours, stepping into the man cave, you're not alone. That's one thing I always
That's
tell
awesome.
people in the context of ministry, where it's all inclusive. We're never alone. I can guarantee you somebody has walked and is walking this earth that has dealt, maybe not the same, like the content of it, but the context is pretty much the same. And so therefore I just say, like, we have to start with just kind of doing some due diligence, man, and just going out there and say, okay, never being afraid. Start with Google. Just start asking questions, and I
Wow.
guarantee you, if you're serious about it, you'll get pointed. You like, I'm a person of faith, so I believe God will lead you to the right direction if you are serious about these things and want to take control of them in your life, if that makes sense.
Amen to that, brother. And let me tell you, that is just like wow, 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 wow. We can say park there for a minute, but I do want to just circle back on some amazing things you said. First off, Brene Brown, absolutely phenomenal.
Yes.
I got one of her books as a Christmas gift from one of my good friends, Yasmina. I didn't know who she was until my friend sent me this book for Christmas and was like, hey, I think, you would really benefit from reading this book, and talking about that vulnerability is just so like, wow. And I think we have to, like you were saying, not see vulnerability as a weakness, but see it as a strength, and see it as almost like a bridge that's really going to, help you, you're going to help someone else because, they're going through something, but they're going to be helping you in exchanges. We're talking about, building relationships and having this exchange. And, it was in my accountability, my men's accountability group, and we were talking about specifically focusing on sexual integrity. And we were saying how come there were not more men in the group. And, and I think this kind of ties into something that you said, and I had said this in our, or one of our last meetings. And I said, we cannot just go up to someone and say, hey, do you have issues or do you struggle with sexual integrity? I said, because that's just going to run people away. We can't be like, hey, are you, cheating on your wife? Hey, are you struggling with pornography? Hey, do you have an issue going to the strip club? Like, you just can't come at folk like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's just gonna get you got, especially if you're in the streets in DC. But the thing that I really brought it back to, and you were saying as well with relationship, is that's where we have to start. We have to find other men whom we have like-mindedness with, right? Whom we have a like-minded, whether that be faith, whether that be views on family, whether that be views in politics, views on whatever it is, and start from there. So like, I know, I'm a man of faith, you're a man of faith, boom, there a relationship starts, there a relationship begins.
Exactly.
And over time, we then build up comfortability, and we build up trust, and we build up the capability to then push into those deeper conversations of, I, struggle with eating too much sugar. You too, man. Like, yo, I've been struggling with that too. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, what? Like, oh, okay, and then it's a bridge, and I really hope, people can see vulnerability as really being a bridge and not necessarily a weakness. But it all goes back to that relationship piece, like you were saying,
Yes, and if you don't mind, and just to piggyback off that, I was watching something with my wife earlier today. She was watching a basketball show on Netflix, and I can't think of the name of it right now. But anywho, this coach, he was working with these boys, and he was a preacher, and the boys, they come from rough backgrounds, and he was relating to them through sports, and so he started coaching part time to really kind of speed this story up to bring home the point. And these boys, when I walked in the room, I was like, wow, they talking like that. She was like, yeah, he I'm like, he's a pastor though. And, and I have to be on guard even that, I wouldn't say I was judgmental, but I was like, I came in, so I'm already trying to put context to it. And so I just sat down. She was like, yeah, just watch it. And so as I'm watching, I'm like, okay, well, they're not cursing him out. That's just the way they are. And so as the episode went on, one of the things he said, and I love it. And I told my wife, every now and then, how you just hear that one quote that just stays with you for the rest of life.
Yeah.
And he said that rules without relationship equals rebellion. And that really stuck with me. And a quote that I've always said, especially when I'm working with young men, is that when we're in a body of context of faith, or even if you're just secular, because the podcast that I do, which is a lot that I see in yours, is that I try not to overload people with scriptures or faith. I just let my life be an example.
Let it show. That's right.
I believe that relationship comes first. Like, if I'm going to model my life after my Savior, I notice that when I'm studying the text and not constructing it to fit my agenda, but truly studying the text, he was highly relational. He sat with people. He was able to sit in the mess, but not become the mess. Wow. And so that's how I look at my life. I'm just like, hey, man, we can just talk. And a lot of times with me, in all honesty, like, I was just in a barbershop earlier today. And I, some of the best barbers tend to, work in the hood. That's just what it is. And so I was in that area, but I was able to have conversations and never try to convict anyone, or never throw out a biblical verse. But we were able to talk about investments, talk about manhood, talk about things of striving to be better, seeing the next version of yourself 5 to 10 years. And everything that I was saying really could be backed up by a biblical principle. But it was no need to quote scripture, because I knew that would be a turnoff to these guys, because relationship comes first. But as they see my life, they will ask me if I'm truly living it. They'll ask me, okay, like, this is not another guy that's just saying one thing and doing another. Bible hey, man, I want to be connected with you. And so anyway, I just wanted to really add that, man, and piggyback off that, because I really like how you unpack that relationship building the bridge. No,
that's so good, man. And that needs to be said. And, I'm in total agreement with that, not being a Bible thumper, not, we are living in a day and age where if you say the word Christian, there is an automatic turn off. Like, they're just people just shut out, they shut down, they tune out, they shut their ears. They don't want to hear anything you got to say. And unfortunately, it's just unfortunate. There's just been a lot of demonstrations of those who have, professed such, and it just has not always translated well in the world. And and I think, you and I are both here just simply saying, we're striving to live a life that shows it and it emulates it. And then maybe that one time when I go in on an episode, about something of my faith, maybe then somebody will consider what I'm saying might actually be something I believe, and something you believe, and something that you walk out and live every day. And that communication of being a Christian just has to really be understood by those of us who are living in this hour. We really have got to understand that. And speaking of communication and emotions kind of together, those are not typically always at the top of everyone's list. I mean, think about a podcast, right? Like, dude, like when I was doing all my research and getting ready to launch this podcast, I specifically was looking at Christian podcasters to see kind of what was it sounding like? What was it looking like? I looked at Black podcasters. What was it sounding like? What was it looking like? I looked at millennial podcasters. What was it sounding like? What was it looking like? And then I was looking at podcasters just by men. What was it looking like? What was it sounding like? Just to kind of I wasn't trying to compare myself. I wasn't trying to copy anyone. I just wanted to understand the space that I was getting ready to enter into, because all those 4 intersections are a part of who I am. And dude, the space is dominated by white women. I was completely flabbergasted. I was like, are you serious? Like, especially in the Christian podcast, especially in the Christian podcast niche. And this is no shade or no ding to any white woman who is doing a podcast. I listened to a number of them and they're great and phenomenal, but I was overwhelmingly shocked about how many women versus men were in the game of podcasting. So you talk about, so now, here I was getting ready to launch a podcast, and I'm getting ready to talk about emotions and having mental breakdowns and losing my hair, like all this crazy stuff. And, people are like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, men don't do that. And I'm like, now I understand why people were saying that, because most of the people dominating in this space are women, and women just seem to be a bit more in touch with their feelings than men. And I know communication and emotions, they're not always on the top of our list as guys, but in your own experience, what would you say you have found to be successful strategies to express a healthy balance of emotion and communication, in healthy ways? The podcast could definitely be an avenue, but what are some other avenues that you would say, whether that be, in your personal life or in the ministry? Well, what would you say there?
Oh man. So for starters, I would say that uh, one is counseling. And
Wow.
like seriously, man. So I personally, just in ministry, I always tell my wife this, and I said that if the Lord leads me to, become a senior pastor, I'm going to have a counselor just off the rip, because I
Mm.
just believe, even with my wife being married, she's great. That's my best friend, man. We spend a lot of time together, even
Bro,
having
you
two
show her
boys.
so much love. Listen, if she listened to this podcast, I just want her to know, man. I know she probably be tuning in, man, but you show her so much love on the show. I'm like, man, that's real. That's real, man. I
Oh
feel
yeah,
it.
no man,
I feel it. I
it's
feel it.
man. Yes, man, that's my one, man, and like I say, but even at the same time, and her and I, we talked, and to kind of get to the point at hand, with her being a woman, it's just certain things, that I know, and I had to learn this, through my dad, through my father in love, that it's no knock on her, but it's just certain things that, not hiding, but I just can't really take to her, just as a man, or I need to unpack with another man that's going to give me sound advice, whether it's spiritual or just good personal development, a good professional development. And so to help me unpack those things before I go to her. And so, like you said, I didn't do as in depth research as you did, but that's an interesting statistic that you stated about what the space is dominated by. So I tend to start there, and like I say, that counseling a lot of times is ad hoc. It's kind of like with me, I try to strive to really be in tune with myself.
Mm.
So I
That's
can
good.
kind of tell when I'm, working as a senior technical project manager, as well as an associate pastor, and a few various other things. I'm sure you have a lot of different titles that you have to navigate, and then on top of that, I'm striving to be the provider of my home. With two boys and hopefully another one soon, little girl soon.
Oh,
But
wow. That's awesome,
yeah,
man.
so
That's dope.
but sometimes I have to say, and like I just come to a point where, man, I'm like being very transparent here. Well, and I hope that space is fine.
Oh yeah, man. And
But
listen, we're all
uh,
about transparency here. Look, I done told folks about how I was, wanting to kill myself and had, mental
yeah,
breakdowns and lost my hair. And come on,
dude,
man, bring
I
it, bring
love
it,
it, man.
bring it,
I
bring it.
love it, man. So with me, it's times that, like with this COVID, matter of fact, let's just start with this COVID when it first hit, and so many things shut down. And I'm looking at my kid, I'm looking at my wife, I'm looking at my kids, and so now I'm going and I'm questioning things, I'm questioning God, and it's like, okay, yeah, I've invested, I've done certain things, I feel like I've been a very responsible adult, and here it is where I'm at the mercy of someone can say, hey, we got to lay you off due to this, and
My
so
God.
now I'm looking at my family, and I'm like, man, I feel like I feel like a failure,
Mm,
and I'm saying these things, and so it's like, my kids, and they're sensing things like, hey, what's wrong with you? My wife is like, you kind of seem a little off, and and I'm kind of trying my best to keep from lashing out, trying my best
yeah.
to keep from just like going inside of a bubble, and so counseling and books and reading things like the five love languages, and just certain books on man communication, they just helped me unpack these things.
Mm,
And so I had to really start like firing the critic that was in my mind. So I had to say, okay, listen, you got to go, bro. The critic, like, I wouldn't allow someone to sit up here and talk this negative to me. So why am I doing it
mm,
to myself? And so I had to hire myself as a personal coach. And then
mm.
start coaching myself through these things, and, making sure that I'm applying, making sure that I'm taking thoughts captive. And it was one book by Levi Lusko where it's called I Declare War, and it's winning a battle against yourself.
I heard about this
And
book.
one of the things that he said was, for all of us that have studied, I mean, for all of us that have, dealt with TSA security, what's the number one thing that they're doing? They're paying attention to everything that comes through that machine in those bins. And if it doesn't comply, they're throwing it out. Well, he said that's the same concept we as men have to take with ourselves. And if we don't, these things carry over and they come
Mm,
out. And he said these things, if they pass security, these things can be used to bring down a plane. So in other words, he was saying, don't let these things destroy your family, destroy your wife, destroy your kids, destroy your friends, and so on and so on. So you want to get those things out of the account. And I just say start there, man. Like you
That's
really have
good.
to start with counseling. You have to start with books, and you have to plug in with an accountability partner, a true brother
Oh my
that you can
goodness.
talk to.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
Accountability partner. Listen, I have one, and we actually changed what we called it because we call each other life allies, because as you were
I love it.
saying, there are certain things that you can't go to your wife with, not to hide, but you're going to go to somebody with it, but you can't go with your wife. And there's just certain things that as men, we know, the two of us know that we know we can only talk about this here and we can't go anywhere else. And it stopped being just, about one particular area about, did you work out today? Did you get in the word today? And now it's like all the, are you eating healthy? Did you get enough water? Did you, then it's like, yo,
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
like, bro, like we're doing life, man. Like, screw this accountability stuff. Like we're just gonna call each other life allies. So,
I love it, man. I love it.
that is so key. We got to be accountable to someone, man. If
We
you're
we
listening,
do.
man, you got to be accountable to somebody. You cannot do this life alone. You were not built to do this life alone. You were not. It is against your natural design as a human being to go through it alone.
Yes,
Stop convincing
yes,
yourself that you can. You cannot. You need to get plugged in with someone who can help you. And I'm going to definitely leave some resources for you in the episode's description where you can get plugged in with some help and assistance when it comes to accountability. But going to our next question here, Tim, with all of that, right? We're talking about, we just don't come out the gate telling people we got issues with the strip club. We don't go just, coming all willy nilly, you got to come right, come correct. We just can't be coming all out here like that. But, there has to even still, I think, be boundaries within the way in which we communicate. And, to you, what would you say? What does it look like to you as a man to be transparent with another man, but still be fully clothed and not naked?
man. So I try to live through a quote that I heard by one of my favorite pastors, McDaniels. He said that be authentic with everyone, but transparent with you. To me, as I unpack that quote, I think it, like you say, it starts with just the necessary relationship. I'm going to say it's levels to this, right? If I just using a guy, if I meet a guy, Joe, off the street, and Joe and I are talking, like you said, I'm not going to walk up and say, "Hey, man, look like you're struggling with infidelity." I'm not going to do that. Even if I seen him committing the act. But if Joe and I build a relationship, I'm just going to start somewhere, maybe like say those surface level things, talking about sports, cars, or whatever, and we start there. And as I get to know Joe, and that's another thing, we have to like study each other. We have to truly, participate in active listening. And I just believe that it's cues there. And so as he releases things, that's going to have me to release things. But at the same time, I think we as men have to be careful and we have to pay attention. Does this person deserve my transparency? Does this person deserve my vulnerability? Because you could be sharing things with me, but let's just say, for instance, you're a gossiper. And I've kind of picked up on this just through discerning and studying you. Well, that's going to keep me from being negative. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you really have to take time to study that person and make sure that you're putting the right boundaries in place. Because I just feel like as the relationship grows, as we develop and we cultivate that relationship, we will know how far we can go in boundaries. For
Mm.
example, last thing, if I invite someone over my house for the first time, okay, they have so many areas they can go inside of my house. But if they go in my bedroom and start looking through my drawers in my closet, you know, we're going to have issues. Because although I've invited you over to where I lay my head down, we haven't cultivated enough of a relationship for you to have access to that area. But
Mm.
let's just say, my wife, she starts to develop and cultivate. Well, I don't know how long it's going to take, just, at the speed of trust or whatever you want to say. But
Mhm.
my wife might say, oh, yeah, hey, such and such, she's going to drop by the house and, pick up XYZ. And I told her that it's in my top drawer. If that level of trust, now that could be her sister or someone like that, but it's a level of trust there. And because it has came over the relationship building. So now it is a sense of vulnerability, and the boundaries. But I just think like when we're first starting out, that boundary needs to be tight as possible until we truly cultivate and learn that person and just develop and cultivate that relationship, if that makes sense.
I agree with that, man. And I even want to take that a step further because I had an experience while I was dating someone at one point, and I reached out to one of my really, really good sisters, and I just called her up and I was like, hey, yo, I think, this kind of little thing happened with me and this girl I was dating, and I don't know, like, this just doesn't seem right, and, to believe in Christians, and it just didn't work out. And the first thing she told me was, she said, bro, you probably crossed a boundary that was never communicated, and you need to get clarity on what it was that you did. And it just opened my eyes. I'm like, wow, that was like me, coming into your home, right? And just walking in your bedroom like, hey, yo, what's up, Tim? Let's hang out. Yeah. That's a boundary that I crossed, right? But then that boundary was never communicated. And I think for a lot of us, when we start in different relationships, we don't know what other people's experiences are. I've worked on cruise ships for, oh my goodness, so much of my life. I've been around the world, and it's always interesting when working with people from different cultures around the world and how they see and view communication, and how, me as an American, there is this understood notion that we are very expressive, very extroverted, very outgoing, and just kind of, like we're all, they see the reality shows that we have, and all of this stuff. Yeah. And so there's this notion like, okay, like this dude's going to just be very open and very this and that and the third. And so like somebody asked me like where I went, like I went off the ship, for the afternoon, like, oh, like where'd you go? Like, that's not a question you can ask me. But see, I didn't communicate that boundary. I didn't communicate that boundary. Like, it was like, hey, yo, I'm just here to work. I'm not really here to make new friends. I got friends at home. I don't need to make new friends. Yeah. And I'm all about being cordial and being a part of the team. But when I'm off the ship, that's my business. But I have to communicate that. And I think, like you're saying in our relationships, we have to not just, use discernment to know when and where we can kind of disclose, open, and share. But we also have to make sure that in that we're saying, hey, I'm really excited about, our new friendship, our new relationship that we're cultivating here. But I also just want to let you know, traditionally, I'm not a very open person. I tend to kind of shy away from talking about stuff like this, stuff like that. I'm open to talk about anything, but when it comes to talking about my immediate family, I kind of keep it off the table. Things like that, just communicating those boundaries very clearly so that there isn't this rift. And, then, you won't be like me, crossing a boundary you didn't know wasn't communicated, and then you just get ghosted. But it's okay. God got somebody else for me. So we just gonna keep it moving. It moving. So bring it all together. Oh, no, wait. You had something there, Tim?
No. I just wanted to say, man, I totally agree with that, because I remember, just real quick, it was actually dealing with a marriage counselor, and communication is just huge in marriage in general. But one thing that has stuck with me, and my wife and I, we always find ourselves just kind of asking this question, ad hoc, just when we both feeling it, just real quick, and it's kind of like, what expectations do you have for me? And a lot of times, because we just feel like I automatically assume that I'm meeting her expectations, and vice versa. But just in the context of what you were saying, I will remember the counselor saying, like, especially when people are dating, he would always say, you can't hold anyone accountable for something that you didn't clearly communicate, or expectations that you didn't clearly set from the beginning. And I just think that goes hand in hand. What you're saying is kind of piggyback off of that. Like, if you wanted to take that in interchangeable boundaries.
No, I completely agree. And I hope whoever, she knows who she is, who ghosted me. If you heard that, I hope you got to own amen and conviction in your own spirit. But we're going to keep it moving. I know my worth. Mariah Carey's here in the studio looking at me like, you know your worth, boy. I know my worth, Mariah. Don't worry. I know my worth. So bringing it all together, man, this has just been such an awesome conversation, and, really unboxing, communication and emotions and boundaries and BroCode and all of that. What are three things? I want you to give us three hot, popping, sizzling, grilling, flambeing, whatever other word I can conjure up before I don't have no more. Okay. Three things that you can give us that we can do, or we can strive toward when it comes to moving forward and looking to becoming better communicators as men.
Yeah. So, man, the first one I would say, just real quick, you got to be in tune with yourself. You have to unpack and learn who you are. I'm 31 years old, and I'm still figuring out who Tim Pratt Jr. is. So that's one. Two, you have to, like I say, have accountability. I believe that when you're doing this, when you're going to take on unpacking these things, and if you're going to really work on communication, just real quick, even if you're a person of faith, it's easy to go to God and say, okay, yeah, my vertical relationship, I'm talking to God about becoming a better person and communicating better, and I'm striving and this and that. But we don't see God's face. But I see your face. I can see someone that can help, with me in accountability. I can see their face. So it's find that person and plug in with them and just tell them, like, these are areas I struggle with and this is what I need help in. And then third, you got to do the work. I think you have to apply it. You have to, because
now we ain't trying to hear do no work now. Come on now. I know you got something else. We really got to do the work, Tim. We really got to do the work.
Yes, man. We have to do the work. Application, man, it's the most vital thing. I have been guilty of this, man. Do you know how many books I have initially read? How many podcasts, YouTube videos that I have listened to over and over, to notes, probably have enough notes to write 3 or 4 bestsellers, and then apply none of it and wonder why nothing happened. But as soon as I started applying things and, not trying to live someone else's story, but I believe principles, they transcend. Like the Bible, like I said, the Bible, you can take just personal development books, even if you're not a person of faith, because I know everybody doesn't believe. So, but I do believe the principles transcend. And so, in other words, like, we have to do the work. And I have to make that the third one and just the main and the last takeaway, because if you don't do the work, all of this stuff that we just talked about on here is mute. It won't matter. It won't do anything for us. And that's just the truth. And I think we really have to hammer down on that, especially in the context of this culture today.
Dude, that is so good, man. Listen, if you have been enjoying this, I'm telling you, this is just an appetizer of what you can get if you tune in and lock in with the Student of Life podcast, with Timothy Pratt Jr. I'm telling you, I appreciate y'all listening to the URC space, but for real, y'all need to go ahead and subscribe. Get plugged in with Tim Pratt. Hey, yo, Tim, tell us where we can find you on socials, online, all that good stuff. Where can we get connected with you?
Yeah, so, man, I would say if you want to really start just off the top, www.timothypratt.org. It's right out the gate. It's up in the top right corner. Every link to my social media page, or you can just go to Facebook, type in Tim Pratt Jr. Or you at Instagram, it's at Tim Pratt Jr. And then, like I said, the podcast is Student of Life Podcast. So any one of those, that's where I'm at, man. And like I said, if you have questions or whatever, want to dive deeper, man, I'm open to everybody, man. I'm just here to do the Lord's will in the way he called me to do it. So,
man, and we're so thankful for it. We need more Tim Pratt Jr.'s here on this planet, man. So thank you for what you do. Continue to keep doing it. And I am so, so happy that we were able to make this happen and have you here on the show. Sure. I want to thank Tim again for being my very special guest here on this episode. We were unboxing all about the BroCode, communication, emotions, boundaries, all in the Mancave Space. Ladies, if you tuned in, don't be trying to take too many notes, because we also want you to follow us on Instagram at Nash Speaks Live. Go ahead and let me know what you thought about this episode. And while you're at it, if you're listening in your podcast queue, if you're on Apple, I would love for you to leave a review for not just Tim's podcast, but mine too. Leave one for the both of us. We're giving you all this good information. It's for free. Just show us some love. We would love to see a 5-star review there on Apple Podcasts. Well, until we are back here in the URC space with another different topic, I want you to remember to keep unboxing your life one blank space at a time, living undaunted, knowing you're unbreakable, and embracing the reality that you're simply a treasure that's unfinished, because you have been redeemed, restored, and reclaimed. That's a fact. Life is always best lived outside the box. Stay free, my friend, and I'll see you next week.